They said I was an extra mouth. Widow CEO bought the building and raised rent. Welcome back and enjoy the story. She hadn't asked for much. A couch to sleep on, a corner of the kitchen for her tea, a little space in the hallway closet. For her coat. After all, she had given them everything. Years of sacrifice, a paid-off education, the down payment on the very apartment they now called theirs. She had moved in after her surgery, just for a while, until she got back on her feet. But time makes people forget. Eleanor Morrison stared out the window of her son's apartment, watching as Manhattan woke to another brisk October morning. At 68, she had never imagined herself here. Dependent, unwanted, a burden. The view of Central Park from the 23rd floor was breathtaking, the kind people paid millions to wake up to. But Eleanor couldn't enjoy it. Not when every cup of tea she made, every hour of television she watched, every square foot she occupied felt like an imposition. The sound of drawers opening and closing in the kitchen reminded her that Bryce would be leaving for work soon. Her son, once the gentle boy who had crawled into her lap after skinned knees, now a successful investment banker with slicked-back hair and custom suits, had grown distant in ways that transcended physical space. Even when they occupied the same room, he seemed elsewhere, scrolling through his phone or typing furiously on his laptop, avoiding her gaze. "Morning, Mum," he said, his voice flat as he poured coffee into his travel mug. Eleanor noticed he didn't pour her a cup, though the pot had more than enough. "Good morning, sweetheart," she smiled, pushing herself up from the window seat with a slight wince. The hip replacement was healing, but the pain lingered like an unwelcome houseguest. "I was thinking of making some banana bread today. Caleb has been asking for it." Bryce glanced at his watch. "Don't go overheating the oven again. Vanessa had to air out the whole apartment last time." The words stung more than they should have. One incident, one small mistake after she'd made hundreds of perfect loaves over the years. But this was how it had been for the 3 months since she'd moved in. Every misstep catalogued, every inconvenience noted. "I'll be careful," she promised, her voice smaller than she intended. When Bryce left, the apartment felt both emptier and more breathable. Eleanor moved carefully through the living room with its minimalist furniture and abstract art. Pieces that Vanessa, her daughter-in-law, had selected from galleries Eleanor couldn't afford to browse. The apartment was a testament to new money, everything coordinated, everything expensive, everything for show. Nothing like the warm, lived-in brownstone in Queens where she had raised Bryce alone after Alfred died. She made her way to the kitchen, her slippered feet silent against the hardwood floors. The kitchen, like everything else in the apartment, was sleek and modern, all stainless steel and marble. Eleanor had her own small section of counter space, a silent demarcation of territory, her tea bags in a small wooden box, her one mug, her pill organizer. As she prepared her tea, Eleanor heard voices from the master bedroom. Vanessa was on the phone, her voice carrying despite her attempt at whispering. "It's just until she's better, Mum. What am I supposed to do? She's Bryce's mother." A pause. "I know, but you should see how she looks at me when I tell her anything, like I'm the villain in her story." Another pause. "The doctor says maybe another month. I don't know if I can—" Eleanor turned on the electric kettle, drowning out the rest of the conversation. She didn't need to hear more. She knew what Vanessa thought of her, the old woman, the burden, the mother-in-law from Central Casting. The kettle clicked off, and Eleanor poured the hot water over her tea bag, watching as the water darkened. She thought of the small studio apartment she had given up to move here after her surgery. It had been modest, but it had been hers. Independent. Free. Now she was a guest who had overstayed her welcome, a fact that became clearer with each passing day. She took her tea to the small room that had been hastily converted from Bryce's home office to accommodate her. A twin bed, a small dresser, a reading lamp. No pictures on the walls, no personal touches. A way station, not a home. As she sat on the edge of the bed, Eleanor's gaze fell on the small lockbox she kept beneath it. Inside was everything that mattered. Alfred's wedding ring, the deed to a small property upstate that she'd kept secret, stock certificates, and a bank statement that would shock Bryce and Vanessa if they ever saw it. Eleanor had never been just a housewife. After Alfred died when Bryce was only 7, she had taken the small insurance payout and started investing. Small properties at first, then commercial real estate. By the time Bryce was in college, she was sitting on the board of a small but profitable development company. But she had kept it quiet, lived modestly, saved and reinvested. No one, not even Bryce, knew the full extent of her worth. She had wanted to be loved for herself, not her money. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Grandma?" A small voice called from the other side. Eleanor smiled, the first genuine smile of the day. "Come in, Caleb." The door opened, and her 7-year-old grandson bounded in, all energy and innocence. Unlike his parents, Caleb saw her, really saw her, not as a burden or an obligation, but as his grandmother, the woman who read him stories and slipped him extra cookies and taught him how to fold paper cranes. "Mum said you're not feeling well today," Caleb said, climbing onto the bed beside her. "I made you this." He handed her a piece of paper with a crayon drawing of 2 figures, one small, one tall, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "It's beautiful," Eleanor said, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the tea. "Is this us?" Caleb nodded vigorously. "Yeah, and that's our house." He pointed to a disproportionately large structure beside them. "When you get better, can we go there? Mom says you used to have a house with a big tree." Eleanor's heart constricted. Her old brownstone. She had sold it to help Bryce and Vanessa with the down payment on this very apartment. "Maybe someday," she said, not wanting to crush his enthusiasm with the reality that her old home now belonged to strangers. "Caleb!" Vanessa's voice called from the hallway. "Time for school!" The boy gave Eleanor a quick hug before running out, leaving her alone with her lukewarm tea and the crayon masterpiece. She looked at the drawing again, at the simplicity of the happiness it depicted. When had her own life become so complicated? When had she allowed herself to become a footnote in the story of her own family? Eleanor placed the drawing on her nightstand and reached for her phone. There were decisions to be made, calls that couldn't wait another day. It was time. She hadn't asked for much. A couch to sleep on, a corner of the kitchen for her tea, a little space in the hallway closet for her coat. But maybe that had been her mistake. Maybe it was time to ask for everything. Respect, acknowledgement. A place at the table she had spent decades setting for others. Eleanor Morrison had built an empire in silence. Perhaps now was the time to let it speak for her. The next morning, Eleanor woke before sunrise. She dressed carefully, in a simple but elegant navy pantsuit she had hidden at the back of her small closet space. She applied a touch of lipstick, slipped on the pearl earrings Alfred had given her on their 5th anniversary, and packed a small overnight bag with essentials. She wrote a brief note and left it on her perfectly made bed. No drama, no accusations. Just the truth. Taking some time for myself. Don't worry. I'll be in touch. As she closed the apartment door behind her, Eleanor felt something she hadn't in months. Freedom. The weight of unwanted obligation lifting from her shoulders with each step toward the elevator. In the lobby, she nodded to the doorman, who knew her only as Mr. Morrison's mother. He didn't know she had once considered buying the building he worked in, or that she sat on boards that approved developments twice this size. Outside, the city was just waking up. Eleanor hailed a taxi, gave an address in Midtown, and didn't look back at the gleaming tower she was leaving behind. The taxi driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror, perhaps surprised to see an elderly woman out so early, looking so determined. "Big day ahead?" he asked conversationally. Eleanor smiled, the kind of smile that comes with certainty. "You could say that. I'm reclaiming something I gave away too easily." By noon, Eleanor was settled in a suite at the plaza, a small extravagance she allowed herself. From the desk by the window, she made call after call, to her lawyer, to her financial advisor, to the CEO of the development company where she still held significant sway. By evening, she had set in motion a plan that had been forming in her mind for weeks. The building where Bryce and Vanessa lived, the Westmore, was owned by a real estate conglomerate that had been looking to liquidate some assets. Eleanor knew this because she still had connections, still read the industry reports, still kept her finger on the pulse of Manhattan real estate despite her supposed retirement. Her phone rang. Bryce. She let it go to voicemail. She wasn't ready to speak to him yet, not until everything was in place. She needed clarity, not guilt, strategy, not emotion. The next call was from her lawyer, Thomas. Eleanor, I've looked into it. The building is indeed coming up for sale, but not publicly. They're entertaining private offers first. If you're serious about this, we need to move quickly. I'm serious, Eleanor said, her voice steady. Make them an offer. Use the accounts we discussed. It's a significant amount, Eleanor. Are you sure? I've spent my entire life being careful with my money, Thomas. It's time some of it worked for me rather than the other way around. There was a pause on the other end of the line. All right, I'll draft the offer tonight. But, Eleanor, is this about your son? Because there are other ways to— This is about recognizing my own worth, Eleanor interrupted, something I should have done a long time ago. After hanging up, Eleanor stood by the window watching the lights of Central Park come on as dusk settled over the city. Her phone buzzed again, Vanessa this time. She silenced it and placed it face down on the desk. Tomorrow would bring more calls, more decisions, more steps toward reclaiming her power. But for tonight, Eleanor Morrison allowed herself the luxury of solitude, of space that was unquestionably hers, of decisions that needed no one's approval but her own. The woman, who had been seen as just an extra mouth to feed, was about to show her family exactly who she was, and always had been. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. 3 days passed before Eleanor returned to the apartment. 3 days of negotiation, of financial maneuvering, of resurrection. When she unlocked the door with her key, she found Bryce pacing the living room. His tie loosened, his face drawn with worry. "Mom!" He rushed toward her, relief and anger battling in his expression. "Where have you been?" "We've been worried." "Sick. I called the police. I called the hospitals. I left a note," Eleanor said calmly, setting her bag down by the door. "Taking some time for myself. That's it? No phone number, no location. Do you have any idea what we've been through?" Eleanor removed her coat and hung it in the small section of the closet allotted to her. "I needed space to think, Bryce, to make some decisions." "Decisions? What decisions? You're recovering from surgery. You should be resting, not disappearing for days." Vanessa emerged from the kitchen, her face a careful mask. "Eleanor, we're glad you're safe." The words were right, but the tone was off, relieved but resentful. "Thank you, Vanessa. Is Caleb home from school?" "He's at a play date. He'll be back for dinner." Vanessa's eyes darted to Bryce, a silent communication Eleanor wasn't meant to understand. "Good. I'd like to speak with both of you." Eleanor moved to the living room, taking a seat in the armchair she rarely used, Vanessa's preferred spot. A small rebellion, but it felt significant. Bryce followed, his worry morphing into suspicion. "What's going on, Mom? Are you okay? Is this about your health? Did the doctors say something?" "I'm fine, Bryce. My health is improving daily." Eleanor folded her hands in her lap, pearl bracelet catching the light. "This is about my future, and, indirectly, yours." Vanessa sat on the edge of the sofa, as far from Eleanor as the furniture allowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I've made some arrangements. I'll be moving out next week." Relief flashed across Vanessa's face before she could hide it. "Oh, well, if you feel ready, that's great. But you know you're welcome to stay until you're fully recovered." The lie hung in the air between them, so transparent Eleanor could almost see through it to the truth beyond. "Get out. Go away. Stop intruding." "That's very kind," Eleanor said, the politeness a shield against what she really wanted to say. "But I've found a place that suits me better." Bryce sat down heavily beside his wife. "Where? Not that studio again. It's a 5th-floor walk-up, Mom. With your hip." "No, not the studio." Eleanor allowed herself a small smile. Actually, I've purchased a penthouse. Silence, complete and utter silence. A what? Bryce finally managed. A penthouse, on Park Avenue. Eleanor kept her voice casual, as if discussing the weather rather than a multi-million-dollar acquisition. That's impossible, Vanessa said, her perfect composure cracking. Those cost... I'm aware of what they cost, Vanessa. I've been in real estate for over 30 years. Another silence, heavier this time. What are you talking about? Bryce's voice had changed, wary now, as if speaking to a stranger. You were a teacher before Dad died. Then you worked in that little real estate office doing paperwork. I started there, yes, but I moved up quickly. Eleanor looked around the apartment, the place she had helped them buy, the place where she had become invisible. I made investments, good ones. I sat on boards. I advised on developments all over the city. I just chose to keep it quiet. Why? The single word seemed to take all of Bryce's strength. Because I wanted to be your mother, not your bank. Because I wanted you to find your own way. Because I thought, foolishly perhaps, that my value wasn't in my wallet. Vanessa was staring at her, reassessing, recalculating. Eleanor could almost see the mental arithmetic. How rich? How influential? How did we not know? So all this time when we thought we were helping you, I didn't need financial help, Eleanor said softly. Just respect, just recognition that I am more than an inconvenience, more than an extra mouth to feed. Vanessa blanched. I never said... I heard you, Vanessa, 3 weeks ago in the kitchen while I was washing dishes. Eleanor kept her voice level, refusing to give in to the hurt that still ran deep. You said exactly that to Bryce. You didn't know I was... there, but I was. Bryce had the decency to look ashamed. Mom, she didn't mean... Please don't insult my intelligence by lying to me now, Eleanor interrupted. Not after everything. The apartment fell silent again, the truth settling around them like dust after an explosion. So you're moving out, Bryce finally said. To punish us? No. Eleanor shook her head. To reclaim myself. To stop being a guest in a life I helped build. She stood, smoothing her slacks with steady hands. There's something else you should know. I've also purchased this building. The words landed like thunder in the still room. What? Bryce and Vanessa spoke, in unison, disbelief painting their features. The Westmore, I bought it, the deal closes tomorrow. Eleanor walked to the window, to the view she had been told she was lucky to share. The management company will be sending out notices about some changes, including rent adjustments. Rent adjustments? Vanessa's voice had risen an octave. What does that mean? Eleanor turned to face them, 68 years of life etched in the dignity of her stance. It means your rent will be increasing, significantly. You can't do that. Vanessa stood now, color high in her cheeks. We have a lease. Yes, you do, and it allows for rent adjustments with new ownership. It's all very legal, I assure you. I had my lawyers check thoroughly. Bryce was staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. Why would you do this to us? I'm not doing anything to you, Bryce. I'm doing something for myself, reminding myself and you of who I am, who I've always been. Eleanor gathered her purse, ready to retreat to her small room for the remainder of her stay. But before she left, she had one more thing to say. You know, when your father died, everyone told me to sell the brownstone. To downsize, to admit I couldn't manage on my own. She paused at the edge of the living room. But I didn't just manage, I thrived. I built something. While raising you, while putting you through college, while giving you the down payment for this very apartment. She looked directly at Vanessa. I was never just an extra mouth to feed. I was the one who fed you both, and it's time you remembered that. With that, Eleanor walked to her room, closing the door softly behind her. Through the wall she could hear Bryce and Vanessa's heated whispers, the panic rising in their voices as the reality of their situation sank in. Eleanor sat on her narrow bed, pulled out her phone, and sent a text to Thomas. It's done. Thank you. Then she looked at Caleb's drawing on her nightstand, the two figures holding hands under the sun. She traced the child's rendition of her face with a gentle finger. Some bridges would need rebuilding, some wounds would need time to heal. But for the first time in months, Eleanor Morrison breathed the full, free breath of a woman who had reclaimed her power, and it felt like coming home. What the future holds for Eleanor and her family is still unclear. But one thing is certain, they will never make the mistake of underestimating her again. The widow, the mother, the CEO had finally stepped into the light, demanding the respect she had always deserved. Will they rise to meet her there or continue to see only what they expected to see? An old woman, a burden, an extra mouth to feed? Only time will tell, but Eleanor Morrison is no longer waiting for permission to claim her place in the world. The reality of Eleanor's revelation hit Bryce and Vanessa like a physical force. For the next 2 days, they moved around her like cautious animals circling an unexpected predator. Their whispered conferences behind closed doors, audible even through their expensive, solid-core doors. Eleanor continued her routine as if nothing had changed. She made her tea in her designated corner. She read to Caleb when he returned from school. She took her daily walk around the block to strengthen her healing hip. But everything had shifted. The power dynamic in the apartment reversing so completely, it left everyone slightly dizzy. On the third morning, the formal notice arrived. Cream-colored envelope. Embossed letterhead from Morrison Holdings, LLC. Vanessa opened it at the breakfast table, her coffee going cold as she read. 3 times, she finally said, her voice a controlled tremor. You're tripling our rent. Eleanor sipped her tea calmly. The building has been undervalued for years. I'm simply bringing it in line with market rates. Market rates? Bryce looked up from his own copy of the letter. Face flushed. This is well above market. This is business, Eleanor interrupted. Something you understand well, Bryce. You've never hesitated to maximize returns for your clients. I'm doing the same. We're not your clients. We're your family. The word family hung heavy in the air, laden with accusation and expectation. Eleanor set her teacup down carefully. Yes, you are, which is why you'll notice the letter also offers an alternative. Vanessa flipped to the second page, scanning it quickly. Co-ownership, what does this mean? It means that instead of paying the increased rent, you can choose to invest in the building, become partial owners yourselves, build equity rather, than simply paying for the privilege of occupancy. Bryce's financial mind engaged, suspicion giving way to calculation. At what terms? Favorable ones. Better than you'd get anywhere else. Eleanor stood, gathering her breakfast dishes. This was never about punishment, despite what you might think. It's about recognition, about seeing me, truly seeing me, for who I am. And who is that, exactly? Vanessa's tone was still brittle, defensive. Eleanor paused at the kitchen threshold. Someone who taught her son the value of investment, someone who wanted her daughter-in-law to understand that family is more than convenience. She looked at them both. These people who had made her feel so small. Someone who deserves better than I've received. Later that afternoon, as Eleanor was preparing to leave for a meeting with her property manager, Bryce knocked on her bedroom door. Mum, can we talk? She opened the door to find him standing there, looking uncertain, an expression she hadn't seen on his face since he was a teenager, asking to borrow the car. Of course. He stepped inside, taking in the sparse room that had been his office, his gaze lingering on the lockbox visible beneath the bed. All this time, he said quietly, all this time you had this other life, this empire, and you never told me. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, gesturing for him to take the room's only chair. I didn't hide it from you, Bryce. I just didn't lead with it. There's a difference. But why? Most people would be proud, would want their family to know. I am proud of what I built, of raising you alone, of surviving when everyone expected me to crumble after your father died. She looked at her son, really looked at him, seeing the boy he had been and the man he had become. But I didn't want my success to overshadow yours. I didn't want you to feel entitled to what I had earned. I wanted you to find your own way. Bryce ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, disheveling it. So, when you helped us with a down payment for this place, and it was a gift, not a hardship, not my last dollar as you seem to believe. Why didn't you correct us, when we acted like Like we were doing you a favor letting you stay here. Eleanor sighed. Pride, perhaps. Or a test I hoped you would pass on your own. I wanted you to be kind, because kindness was right, not because you thought I could buy the building out from under you. A small, sad smile crossed her face, which, as it turns out, I could and did. Bryce was quiet for a long moment, processing. The rent increase. Are you really going through with it? Yes, unless you choose the partnership option. And if we can't afford either? Eleanor's eyes hardened slightly. You can, Bryce. You simply might have to adjust your priorities. Fewer weekend trips to the Hamptons, one less designer handbag for Vanessa. The kind of adjustments I made for decades to ensure you never went without. The truth of it seemed to hit him then, how much she had sacrificed, how little he had noticed. I'm sorry, he said finally, the words sounding rusty, unpracticed. For how we've treated you, for what Vanessa said, for not seeing you. Eleanor reached out, touching his cheek briefly, the first physical contact they'd had in weeks. I know. But sorry isn't enough, Bryce. Not anymore. I need change. Real change. He nodded slowly. The partnership offer. I'd like to discuss, to understand the details. I thought you might. You're your mother's son, after all. Eleanor stood, smoothing her slacks. I have a meeting, but I'll be back for dinner. We can talk more then. As she moved past him toward the door, Bryce caught her hand. Mom, when you move to your new place, would you still come for Sunday dinners for Caleb? The question surprised her, vulnerable, genuine. She squeezed his hand gently. We'll see, one step at a time. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning, a crack in the wall of hurt that had been building between them. Eleanor left for her meeting feeling lighter than she had in months. The road to reconciliation would be long, but at least now there was a road at all. What Eleanor didn't realize was that while bridges were beginning to mend with Bryce, the Newark chasm between her and Vanessa was only growing wider and deeper. Some wounds heal cleanly, others fester in secret, and Vanessa Andrews Morrison was not a woman who forgave being humbled easily, nor one who forgot the taste of crow once it had been forced down her throat. That evening, as Eleanor returned from her meeting, she heard raised voices from the master bedroom, Bryce and Vanessa locked in heated debate. She didn't need to hear the words to know the subject. Her, the apartment, the choice they faced. She moved quietly to her room, closing the door softly behind her. Tonight, she would give them space to process, to decide. Tomorrow would be time enough to see which path they would choose, resentful compliance or genuine reconciliation. Eleanor sat at the small desk in her room, opened her laptop, and began reviewing the plans for her new penthouse. In 3 weeks, she would be moving into a space that was truly hers, not borrowed, not temporary, not contingent on anyone's goodwill. As she scrolled through the interior designer's proposals, a text message lit up her phone. Thomas. The Westmore deal is officially closed. Congratulations, Eleanor. You now own the building. She stared at the message, letting the reality of it sink in. All those years of careful investment, of quiet ambition, of playing the long game had culminated in this moment. She owned the building where her son and his family lived, where they had made her feel small, where she had reclaimed her power. Eleanor closed her laptop and walked to the window, looking out at the city she had helped shape, one building at a time. The lights of Manhattan twinkled back at her, a constellation of possibilities. I am not an extra mouth to feed, she whispered to her reflection in the glass. I am the one who fed you. And for the first time in months, Eleanor Morrison smiled a smile that reached her eyes. Is the past truly past, or does it linger in the foundations of the present, dictating our actions and reactions in ways we cannot fully comprehend? For Eleanor Morrison, reclaiming her power meant confronting truths long buried beneath the polite fictions of family life. But as she would soon discover, real power lies not in possession, but in the wisdom to know when and how to wield it. The walls of the Westmore now belonged to her, but could she rebuild what mattered most? The trust and respect of those within? The morning dawned grey and overcast, the October sky hanging low over Manhattan like a promise unfulfilled. Eleanor woke to the sound of rain against the window, a gentle percussion that had always soothed her. She lay still for a moment, taking stock of her body, the dull ache in her hip less pronounced today, her mind clear and focused. Today was the day she would show Bryce and Vanessa the partnership agreement. The day they would have to decide, continue as tenants paying premium rates or become investors in their own future. She had instructed her lawyer to draw up terms that were fair but firm. No special treatment but no punishment either. Just business conducted with the professionalism she had cultivated over decades. Eleanor dressed with care, a charcoal grey pantsuit, a silk scarf at her neck, low heels that accommodated her healing hip, but still gave her the height that had always made her feel more commanding. Power dressing wasn't vanity, it was armor. When she emerged from her room, she found Caleb alone at the breakfast table, pushing cereal around his bowl with desultory interest. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. Caleb looked up, his expression troubled in a way that seemed wrong on a 7-year-old's face. "Grandma, are Mom and Dad fighting because of you?" The question was a punch to the gut, direct, unfiltered, the way only children can be. Eleanor sat beside him, choosing her words carefully. "Your parents and I are working through some grown-up problems. Sometimes that means disagreements." Mom was crying last night, and Dad slept on the couch. Eleanor's heart constricted. This wasn't what she had wanted, to introduce strife into Caleb's world, to make him collateral damage in her bid for recognition. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said honestly. "But you know what? Adults sometimes need to work through difficult feelings just like you do when you're upset. It doesn't mean they don't love each other or you." Caleb seemed to consider this, spoon suspended midway between bowl and mouth. "Are you leaving because you don't love us anymore?" "Oh, Caleb." "No." Eleanor reached for his small hand. "I'm leaving because sometimes grown-ups need their own space. But I will never stop loving you, never." The boy nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "Will you still come to my soccer games when you move to your new house?" Wild horses couldn't keep me away, Eleanor promised, heart swelling with love for this child who still saw her clearly. The sound of the master bedroom door opening ended their conversation. Vanessa appeared, dressed for work in a tailored pencil skirt and silk blouse, her face carefully made up to hide any evidence of the tears Caleb had mentioned. "Good morning," she said, her voice neutral. "Caleb, hurry up with breakfast. The bus will be here in 10 minutes. Eleanor stood, moving to the kitchen to prepare her tea. "I thought we might discuss the partnership agreement this evening," she said to Vanessa's back. "I've had my lawyer draw up the papers." Vanessa turned, her expression a mask of polite indifference. "Bryce and I have been talking. We're not sure the partnership is the right move for us." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And the rent increase?" "We'll manage." Vanessa's chin lifted slightly, a challenge in her eyes. "Bryce is up for a promotion, and I've been thinking of going back to work full-time." The subtext was clear. "We don't need you. We'll find another way." Eleanor nodded slowly, understanding the pride at play. "The offer remains open. No deadline." Vanessa's smile was tight. How generous. The tension in the room was palpable, hanging between them like an invisible curtain. Eleanor wondered if this was what it would be like from now on. Polite hostility, surface civility covering deeper resentments. "Caleb mentioned you were upset last night," Eleanor said quietly, making sure the boy was out of earshot, having gone to brush his teeth. "If you want to talk, I don't." Vanessa's response was immediate, sharp. "What's done is done. You've made your point." "That wasn't my intention, Vanessa. Making a point, I mean." "Then what was your intention, Eleanor? To humble us? To remind us of our place?" Vanessa's perfect composure cracked just for a moment. "To show us that everything we have, everything we are, is because of your generosity." The accusation stung, partly because there was a grain of truth in it. Eleanor had wanted recognition, had wanted them to see her value. But this bitterness, this division, wasn't what she had envisioned. "No," she said finally. I wanted to be seen, to be respected, to be treated as more than an inconvenience in your perfectly designed life. Vanessa looked away, blinking rapidly. Well, mission accomplished. We see you now, all of you. She gathered her bag, checking her watch. I have to get Caleb to the bus. We'll discuss the partnership another time. As Vanessa left the kitchen, Eleanor stood alone, her tea cooling in her hands. The victory she had imagined, the moment when her family would finally recognize her worth, felt hollow now. She had won the battle, but might be losing something far more precious. That evening, Eleanor laid out the partnership documents on the dining table. Bryce returned from work looking tired, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more vulnerable. Vanessa remained in the bedroom, claiming a migraine. She's not coming, Bryce said, loosening his tie as he sat across from Eleanor. I think it's better if we discuss this alone anyway. Eleanor nodded, pushing the folder toward him. These are the terms: fair market value, favorable interest rate, gradual equity building, better than you'd get from any bank. Bryce opened the folder, skimming the documents with the practiced eye of a financial professional. This is actually very generous. I told you this isn't about punishment. Then what is it about, Mom, really? Bryce looked up, his eyes searching hers. Eleanor sighed, the weight of years in the sound. Recognition, respect, realizing that I have value beyond what I can give you. I've always respected you. Have you? When's the last time you asked about my life, my work, my dreams? Eleanor kept her voice gentle but firm. You've seen me as your mother, a role, not a person, someone to call when you need help, to tolerate when I need it. Bryce had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't realize. I know, that's part of the problem. They sat in silence for a moment, the air heavy with unspoken words. The partnership, Bryce finally said. Vanessa doesn't want to do it. She sees it as another form of control. And you? I see it as what it is, a business opportunity. A good one. He closed the folder. But I'm not sure I can convince her. Eleanor nodded, unsurprised. Then the rent increase stands. Mum, that's nearly triple what we're paying now. I know exactly what it is, Bryce. I set the number. Eleanor folded her hands on the table. You have choices. Accept the partnership, pay the increased rent, or move. The starkness of the options hung between them. I never thought you could be this cold, Bryce said, his voice low. Is that what you see, coldness? Eleanor shook her head. What I see is finally valuing myself enough to set boundaries, to stop accepting scraps of attention and respect from my own son. And if this ruins us, our relationship, I mean. Eleanor felt a crack in her resolve, a hairline fracture in the wall she had built. Then we'll rebuild it, on more equal footing. Later that night, Eleanor lay awake in her narrow bed, listening to the sounds of the apartment, Caleb's soft snores from across the hall, the occasional car horn from the street below, the muffled voices of Bryce and Vanessa still discussing their options. Had she gone too far, pushed too hard? The doubt crept in like a thief, stealing her certainty, piece by piece. She reached for her phone, scrolling through emails until she found what she was looking for, the final designs for her penthouse, the space that would be hers alone. No compromises, no concessions, no corners allocated by someone else's grudging generosity. But as she looked at the sleek modern renderings, she felt a strange emptiness. The rooms were beautiful, large, airy, filled with light, but they were also sterile, lacking the chaos and warmth of family, of Caleb's laughter, of Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings. Eleanor set the phone aside, staring at the ceiling. Power was one thing, connection was another. She had claimed the first, but was she sacrificing the second? Morning brought a surprise. When Eleanor emerged from her room, she found Caleb at the breakfast table as usual, but beside him sat Vanessa, still in her robe, eyes red-rimmed but clear. "Good morning," Eleanor said cautiously. Vanessa nodded in acknowledgement. "Caleb, why don't you go get dressed for school?" Once the boy had left, Vanessa gestured to the chair across from her. "We should talk." Eleanor sat, wary of the olive branch being extended. "I'm listening." I've been thinking about what you said about being seen. Vanessa's fingers traced patterns on the tabletop. It made me realize something about myself. Oh? I've spent my whole life trying to be seen too, by my parents who were always too busy, by Bryce who works too much, by colleagues who underestimate me. She looked up, meeting Eleanor's gaze directly. I think that's why I resented you so much when you moved in. You took up space I was still fighting for. The honesty was unexpected, disarming. Eleanor felt her defenses lowering slightly. I never meant to push you out of your own home, but that's how it felt. Like I was losing ground, like I was invisible in my own kitchen. Vanessa's laugh was hollow. Ironic, isn't it? We were both feeling the same thing. Eleanor considered this, seeing Vanessa truly for perhaps the first time, not as an obstacle or an adversary, but as a woman fighting her own battles for recognition. What do you want, Vanessa, from this situation? I want my home back, but I also want... She paused, searching for words. I want respect from Bryce, from you, from myself. The partnership is a good deal. I know. Bryce showed me the numbers. Vanessa straightened her shoulders. But I have a counter-proposal. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite herself. I'm listening. I want to work for you, at your company. Of all the things Eleanor had expected, this wasn't on the list. You want to work for me? With you, Vanessa corrected. I have a business degree I've never used, marketing experience from before Caleb was born, skills that have been gathering dust while I've been playing the perfect corporate wife. Eleanor studied the younger woman, seeing the determination beneath the vulnerability. And Bryce, what does he think of this idea? He doesn't know yet. This is between you and me, woman to woman. The phrase hung in the air between them, an acknowledgement, an offering, a bridge. Eleanor nodded slowly. I'll need to see your resume, and you'd start at entry level, regardless of your connection to me. I wouldn't have it any other way. And the apartment? The rent? Vanessa's jaw tightened slightly. We'll take the partnership, but I want it in both our names, mine and Bryce's, equal partners. Eleanor felt something shift inside her, respect blooming where resentment had taken root. This wasn't surrender on Vanessa's part. It was strategic realignment, business, not emotion. You drive a hard bargain, Eleanor said, a smile touching her lips. I learned from watching you, Vanessa replied, the ghost of an answering smile on her own face. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was the beginning of something new, a relationship built on mutual respect rather than obligation. Two women who had spent too long fighting for scraps of recognition, now claiming their seats at the table together. The apartment was quiet that evening, a fragile truce settling over its rooms. Bryce, informed of the new arrangement, had been stunned into rare silence. Caleb, sensing the shift in atmosphere, had been unusually well behaved, as if afraid to disturb the delicate balance. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, reviewing the modified partnership agreement her lawyer had sent over. The terms were fair. Ownership, split evenly between Bryce and Vanessa, with provisions for gradual payment rather than an immediate financial burden. She was about to close her laptop when a soft knock came at the door. Come in, she called, expecting Bryce or Vanessa. Instead, Caleb peered around the edge of the door, pajama-clad and solemn. Grandma, can I ask you something? Eleanor smiled, closing her computer. Of course, sweetheart. Come here. He padded across the kitchen in his spaceship slippers, climbing onto the chair beside her. Are you still going to move away? The question pierced her heart with its directness, its vulnerability. Yes, I am, but not far, and you can visit whenever you want. Promise? Promise. She brushed his hair from his forehead. In fact, you'll have your very own room there. His eyes widened. Really? With space stuff? With all the space stuff you could want. Eleanor chuckled. Stars on the ceiling. Rocket ship bed. The works. Caleb nodded solemnly, as if this were a serious business negotiation. Good, because Dad said we might have to move, and I was worried I wouldn't see you anymore. Eleanor frowned. Your dad said you might move. When? When he and Mum were fighting, He said if Grandma makes us pay too much, we'll have to find a different place. Caleb's lower lip trembled slightly. I don't want to move. My friends are here. Eleanor put her arm around his small shoulders, pulling him close. You're not going to move, Caleb. Your home is here. Promise? I promise. And in that moment, Eleanor knew she would make whatever adjustments necessary to ensure Caleb's stability. The rent increase, the partnership, they were leverage, negotiating tactics. But this child's security was non-negotiable. Later, after tucking Caleb into bed with an extra story, Eleanor found Bryce in the living room, working on his laptop. "Oh, we need to talk," she said, taking the seat across from him. Bryce looked up, wariness in his eyes. About? Caleb just told me you've been discussing moving, that he's worried about leaving his friends. Bryce had the grace to look ashamed. We were just exploring options. Vanessa told me about your arrangement, the job, the partnership, we're staying. Good, because I won't have my grandson uprooted because of our situation. Eleanor's voice was firm. He deserves stability. Agreed. Bryce set his laptop aside. Mum, I've been thinking about everything, about how we've treated you. Eleanor waited, giving him space to continue. I'm sorry, truly sorry. The words seemed to cost him something. I've been so caught up in my own life, my own success, that I forgot who helped make it possible, who sacrificed to get me here. Thank you for saying that. Eleanor's voice was quiet. It means a lot. When you move to your new place, and I'd like to start over, weekly dinners, family time, the way it should be. Eleanor felt a warmth spreading through her chest, not the fierce heat of vindication she had expected, but something gentler. The idea warmth of reconciliation, of bridges being rebuilt rather than burned. I'd like that, she said simply. As she rose to go to bed, Bryce spoke again. Mom, the building, it's really impressive. What you've accomplished. Eleanor paused, looking back at her son. Thank you, Bryce. That means more than you know. Have you ever experienced a moment when you felt invisible in your own family or among people who should value you? When you had to reclaim your own power and remind others of your worth? Think about it and share your thoughts in the comments. The weeks passed in a blur of activity. Eleanor oversaw the renovations on her penthouse, met with her property management team about improvements to the Westmore, and began the gradual process of transitioning Vanessa into a role at Morrison Holdings. To Eleanor's surprise, Vanessa proved to be not just competent but insightful, bringing fresh perspectives to marketing strategies that had grown stale over time. There were still moments of tension, still undercurrents of the old resentments, but they were learning to work together. Two strong women finding common ground in mutual respect. Bryce, too, was changing. He called Eleanor more frequently, not just about the partnership details, but to ask her advice on investments, to share stories about his day, to check on her health. Small steps, but meaningful ones. The day Eleanor moved into her penthouse was crisp and clear, November sunshine bathing the city in golden light. The movers had already delivered her furniture, a blend of cherished antiques from storage and new pieces that reflected her elegant taste. Caleb had insisted on helping, supervising the setup of his space-themed bedroom with all the authority a 7-year-old could muster. As Eleanor unpacked her personal items in the master bedroom, photographs, books, the small keepsakes that transform a house into a home, she heard the doorbell ring. "I'll get it," Caleb called, his footsteps pattering across the hardwood floors. Eleanor followed more slowly, curious about who might be visiting. She had given her new address to only a handful of people. In the foyer, she found Vanessa and Bryce, arms laden with packages. "Housewarming," Vanessa explained, holding out a large gift basket. "We thought you might need some essentials." Eleanor accepted the basket, touched by the gesture. "Thank you. That's very thoughtful." Bryce set down the box he was carrying. "We also brought dinner. Figured you wouldn't want to cook your first night here." That's lovely," Eleanor said, genuinely moved. "Please come in. Everything's still a bit chaotic, but..." "It's beautiful, Mom," Bryce interrupted, looking around at the spacious living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows and panoramic city views. "Really spectacular." They settled in the dining room, unpacking containers of food from Eleanor's favorite Italian restaurant. The table was still partially covered with boxes, but they cleared a space, using paper plates and plastic utensils in lieu of Eleanor's good china, still packed away. It should have felt awkward, this impromptu dinner in a half-unpacked apartment, the history of hurt and misunderstanding still fresh, but somehow it didn't. There was laughter as Caleb recounted the mover's struggles with his rocket ship bed. There were genuine compliments from Vanessa about Eleanor's design choices. There was Bryce, pouring wine into plastic cups, toasting new beginnings. As the evening wore on, Eleanor found herself relaxing, the tension of the past months easing from her shoulders. This moment of simple familial connection was what she had been missing. Not grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but the quiet acknowledgement of belonging, of mattering. After dinner, as Bryce and Vanessa prepared to leave, Vanessa hung back, letting Bryce take Caleb down to the lobby. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly, "for the opportunity at the company, for believing in me." Eleanor smiled. "You've earned it. Your ideas on the Riverside development were excellent." Vanessa nodded, a faint blush of pride coloring her cheeks. "Also, I wanted you to know that we've decided to accept the partnership offer. Fully. I'm glad to hear it." Eleanor hesitated, then added, "It's a solid investment, one that will benefit Caleb someday too." "That's what Bryce said." Vanessa paused at the door. "Eleanor, I know we've had our differences, but I want you to know that I see you now, I really do." The words, so simple yet so profound, washed over Eleanor like a balm. To be seen, to be acknowledged, it was all she had ever wanted. "Thank you, Vanessa, that means more than you know." After they left, Eleanor walked through her new home, taking in the space that was entirely hers. No small corner, no designated chair, no borrowed existence. Here she was Eleanor Morrison, widow, mother, grandmother, CEO, whole, complete, visible. She stepped out onto the terrace, the night air cool against her skin. Below, the city pulsed with light and life, a tapestry of stories unfolding in countless windows. Somewhere down there, Bryce, Vanessa, and Caleb were heading home to the Westmore, a building that connected them to her in ways beyond the personal now. Eleanor thought about the journey that had brought her here, the hurt that had driven her to reclaim her power, the healing that was slowly beginning. It wasn't perfect. There would still be difficult conversations, old patterns to break, new boundaries to establish. But for the first time in months she felt hopeful. She hadn't asked for much. A couch to sleep on, a corner of the kitchen for her tea, a little space in the hallway closet for her coat. In the end, she had given herself so much more. Her dignity, her independence, her rightful place in the family she had nurtured. Eleanor Morrison gazed out at the skyline, at the empire she had built in silence, and smiled. She was not an extra mouth to feed. She was the one who fed them all. And now, finally, they knew it too. 3 months later, Eleanor sat in her office at Morrison Holdings, reviewing the quarterly reports. The Westmore was now one of their most profitable properties, thanks to strategic improvements and Vanessa's marketing campaign targeting young professionals. A knock at the door interrupted her concentration. "Come in," she called, looking up from her computer. Thomas entered, a thick folder under his arm. "The contracts for the Brooklyn development are ready for your signature." "Thank you." Eleanor accepted the folder, skimming the contents. "Any word from the Zoning Commission?" "All cleared. We can break ground next month." Eleanor nodded, satisfied. "And how is our newest executive performing?" Thomas smiled. "Mrs. Morrison Jr. is making quite an impression. The rebranding strategy she proposed has already generated significant interest." "I'm not surprised." Eleanor signed the contracts with a flourish. She's always had good instincts. She just needed the right opportunity to use them. After Thomas left, Eleanor checked her watch. Nearly 6. Time for her to head home if she wanted to prepare for dinner. Tonight was Sunday, which meant family. Dinner at her penthouse, a tradition they had established and maintained faithfully since her move. As she gathered her things, her phone chimed with a text from Bryce. Running late. Meeting ran over. Save me some of that pot roast. Eleanor smiled, typing back, "Traffic's bad, take your time, food will be waiting." The relationship with her son had evolved over these past months. Not perfect, but stronger, more honest. They had learned to see each other as full people, not just roles to be played. The partnership in the Westmore had given them common ground, a shared interest beyond family obligation. Vanessa, too, had changed. Working at Morrison Holdings had given her purpose, independence, a sense of identity beyond wife and mother. She and Eleanor still had their moments of tension, their different perspectives, but they had developed a grudging respect that was gradually warming into something like friendship. And Caleb, dear Caleb, thrived in the new dynamic. He spent weekends at Eleanor's penthouse, helped her tend the rooftop garden, and proudly told his friends that his grandmother owned buildings all over the city. As Eleanor drove home through the early evening traffic, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The humiliation of being seen as an extra mouth to feed had been a turning point, a moment when she had stopped accepting less than she deserved. The rent increase had been reduced after the first quarter, once Bryce and Vanessa had proven their commitment to the partnership. It had never really been about the money anyway. It had been about recognition, about respect, about being seen. Eleanor parked in her reserved space beneath the building and took the private elevator to her penthouse. As the doors opened directly into her foyer, she was greeted by the smell of the pot roast already cooking. Vanessa had a key and often came early to start dinner on Sundays, a peace offering that Eleanor gratefully accepted. "Hello?" she called, setting down her briefcase. "In the kitchen," Vanessa's voice called back. Eleanor found her daughter-in-law at the counter, chopping vegetables with practiced ease. Caleb perched on a stool beside her, carefully tearing lettuce for the salad. "Grandma!" Caleb jumped down, running to embrace her. "I got an A on my space project, the one you helped me with." "That's wonderful." Eleanor hugged him close, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, his unconditional love. "I knew you would." Vanessa smiled over the cutting board. "He hasn't stopped talking about it since school." The teacher was very impressed with the orbit calculations. "Well, real estate development requires a good understanding of geometry," Eleanor said with a wink to Caleb. "Why don't you go set up that new telescope on the terrace? The sky should be clear tonight." As Caleb dashed off, Eleanor moved to the kitchen, washing her hands at the sink. "Can I help with anything?" "You could finish the salad," Vanessa suggested, sliding the cutting board toward her. "Bryce called. He's about 20 minutes away." They worked side by side in comfortable silence for a few moments, the rhythmic sound of chopping filling the kitchen. "I've been thinking," Vanessa said finally, "about that day in your son's apartment when I said what I said." Eleanor's hands stilled briefly before continuing their work. "Oh? If I hadn't said it, if you hadn't heard me, none of this would have happened." Vanessa gestured around them at the penthouse, at their newfound relationship. "You might still be living in a converted office, feeling invisible." "Perhaps," Eleanor acknowledged, "or perhaps it would have been something else. The truth has a way of surfacing eventually." Vanessa nodded thoughtfully. "Still, I'm sorry for saying it, but I'm not sorry for where we've ended up." Eleanor looked at her daughter-in-law, really looked at her. The woman who had once seen her as a burden and intrusion was now a partner in more ways than one. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. "Neither am I," Eleanor said softly. Later, after dinner had been eaten and cleared away, after Bryce had discussed the latest developments at his firm, after Caleb had proudly pointed out constellations through his new telescope, the family gathered in Eleanor's living room. "I have an announcement," Eleanor said, setting down her glass of wine. "I've been thinking about the future, about legacy." Bryce and Vanessa exchanged glances, a silent communication born of years together. "What kind of legacy, Mom?" Bryce asked. Eleanor smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "I've decided to establish a foundation for women entrepreneurs over 50, to provide mentorship, funding, connections." That's incredible," Vanessa said, genuine admiration in her voice. "I thought so too." Eleanor looked at each of them in turn. "And I'd like both of you to be on the board, to help shape it." Bryce leaned forward, surprised. Us? Why? Because you both understand something essential now, the value of being seen, of having your worth recognized. Eleanor's voice was firm, confident, and because I trust you with my legacy, with my vision. The words hung in the air, powerful in their simplicity. Trust, legacy, vision, things that had seemed impossible months ago when hurt and resentment had clouded everything. We'd be honored, Bryce said finally, reaching for Vanessa's hand. Incredibly honored, Vanessa echoed. As Eleanor looked at her family, her son, her daughter-in-law, her grandson now dozing on the sofa, she felt a profound sense of completion. She had reclaimed her power, yes. But more importantly, she had reclaimed her place, not as an afterthought or an obligation, but as the matriarch, the foundation, the heart of this small but mighty clan. She hadn't asked for much: a couch to sleep on, a corner of the kitchen for her tea, a little space in the hallway closet for her coat, but life had given her so much more, a second chance at family, at connection, at being truly seen. Eleanor Morrison smiled, content in the knowledge that she would never again be just an extra mouth to feed. She was, and always had been, the one who fed them all, with love, with opportunity, with the example of a woman who knew her own worth and refused to settle for less, and that was a legacy worth building on. Congratulations. Type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.